Am I the a hole for saying it's not my problem if my ex and her husband can't afford their kids? Hey, I, 30M, have been dealing with a long, complicated situation with my ex-wife. And I just need to know if I'm being unreasonable or if I finally just run out of patience. So, I was married to Marin, 30F, and we have a son together. He's 8 now. The story goes back to when Marin was pregnant. I found out she had been cheating on me with a guy named James, 33M. Here's where it gets messy. James also had a girlfriend at the time and she was pregnant too. So, while I was preparing to become a father, I was also spiraling because I didn't even know if the baby was mine. When my son was born, Marin didn't even tell me. It was her parents who informed me about the birth and gave me the hospital info. James was there at the birth. I wasn't. He was supporting her through the later stages of pregnancy, while I was completely shut out. I had to go through the courts just to get a DNA test, which thankfully proved I was the biological father. Because I was still legally her husband at the time, that actually worked in my favor when it came to filing for custody. The paternity result also allowed our divorce to proceed. Now, while all this drama was unfolding, James ended up with full custody of his daughter from his previous relationship. Then, not long after, he and Marin had another child together. So, at this point, they were raising 3 kids: James' daughter, our son, shared custody, and their baby girl. A couple years later, they added 2 more kids to the mix. That's 5 kids in total, none of whom, besides our son, I have any legal or moral responsibility for. Things between Marin and me were toxic even before the custody battle. But about 3.5 years ago, things reached a breaking point. I was paying child support at the time because I earned more than Marin, but we had equal parenting time. That was until I started noticing things. My son would come back to me wearing dirty, worn-out clothes. He'd mention being hungry, sometimes even skipping meals. I kept records, brought it to court, and eventually, I was granted primary custody. Marin's custody was reduced to every other weekend. The court also ordered her to pay a small amount of child support. Not much, because she doesn't earn much, but she rarely pays it. Her excuse is always the same: we can't afford it. I don't press the issue, because I can financially support my son without her. I just want him to be okay. My son is now in therapy. There's been a lot of instability in his young life. Between the early custody battles, living in a house with multiple siblings who aren't treated equally, and the general chaos, I felt therapy was necessary. Thankfully, it's been helping him process things and cope better. For the past 2 years, Marin has been subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, trying to get me to help support the other children in her household. Specifically, she asks every year if I can buy extra school supplies, not just for our son, but also for James' daughter and their other kids. I've always ignored these requests. I make sure my son is fully prepared for school and occasionally donate to his class when the teacher sends a list. But I have never bought anything for Marin and James' other children. 2 weeks ago, my son had a minor surgery. Marin showed up at the hospital, and while we were waiting, she brought up the school supplies again. This time she came across more desperate than usual. She told me they can barely make ends meet, that her other kids are suffering, and asked me to please be decent and help by buying school supplies for the girls. I didn't want to cause a scene in the hospital, so I moved to another part of the waiting room. But she followed me and kept pushing. Finally, I turned to her and said, "I don't care if you and James can't afford your other kids. They are not my responsibility. You already once denied our son food and proper clothing just to try and get more money out of me, and you lost shared custody because of it. My priority is, and always will be, my son, not the kids you keep having." She didn't say anything else at the time, but she's since sent me a flood of messages through our court-ordered co-parenting app. She's called me cold, selfish, heartless, and said I'm not a good father because a good father would teach his son to care for his siblings. I haven't responded to any of it. My lawyer is aware of the messages and advised me to keep ignoring them unless it becomes legally relevant. As for Marin's visitation, unfortunately, that's locked in for now. As long as there's no active CPS case and my son doesn't refuse to go when he's older, she'll continue to get her alternate weekends. I won't lie, it hurts that she's trying to paint me as a bad father when I've done everything to protect and care for our son. I've never once tried to prevent her from being in his life. I don't talk badly about her to him, but I'm done bending over backwards just to be seen as nice. So, am I the a-hole for telling my ex that it's not my problem if she and her husband can't afford their kids, and for refusing to help them out?